Under the moonlight, a boy was held captive and screamed for his mother's justice while his father turned away. That boy was Bellywound. The doors were closed on him. Yet with tears and determination flickering across his face, he left the sect, vowing to build a new order from scratch, grow stronger, and make those responsible for his mother's death. And those who stayed silent pay. 12 years had passed since that incident, and Woon was once again locked in battle. A frantic man before him pleaded desperately, insisting that Woon must also have a wish, and promising to grant it, if only he would speak it. The small boy from the past had long grown into a man, and though the flames of burning buildings roared behind him, his face remained expressionless, his grip steady around a bloody broken sword. His opponent taunted him with a sly tone, suggesting that the offer was not such a bad deal for him either. But Woon declared that there was indeed something he wanted. The man, believing he had wounded right where he wanted him, pressed on with smug confidence, asking what it was that he desired. Yet with a faint, deadly smile, Woon revealed his answer. He wanted the man's life. The opponent's expression hardened in anger, dismissing Woon's as not funny. Woon, unfazed, growled that if the man wouldn't give it willingly, then he would simply take it himself, raising his blood-stained sword toward his foe. The man exploded in rage, shouting profanities and vowing to tear Woon apart until no one could recognize his corpse. But before he could even act, Woon was already behind him, coldly remarking that his mouth was just as filthy as his face suggested. In the next heartbeat, Woon's blade sliced through the air, striking cleanly. The man went flying, crashing into the ground with a deafening impact. As smoke and dust billowed from the crater, Woon stood still, waiting, sensing that the fight wasn't over. His instincts were right. The man staggered up behind him, charging with fury and threatening to send Woon's head flying to the Murim Alliance. But Woon gathered an intense energy into his shattered sword, and with a flawless arc, unleashed a slash so sharp it split the man cleanly in two. As the flames consumed the building around them, someone stood outside watching the chaos unfold. It was a woman. When Woon finally emerged through the burning doorway, victorious and bloodied, he tossed the broken sword sideways and began walking forward. The woman standing firm spoke up and said she had been told to deliver something once the task was done. A scroll held delicately in her hand. Woon's face smeared in blood yet smiling faintly thanked her, calling her Moyong Hien and expressing gratitude for her patience. She thought internally that he should really wipe the blood off his face first, but aloud she brushed it off as nothing serious. Woo accepted the scroll, spreading it open to read the contents. Then, dipping 2 fingers into the blood on his face, he drew a strange symbol onto the paper while thinking that this might be the end or perhaps the beginning of something new. Tossing the scroll aside, which Hyeon quickly caught, he laughed and said she should deliver it to the Murim Alliance, announcing his retirement. When she asked if he was heading back to his hometown, Woo nodded, wiping his face, saying that he had achieved everything he wanted in the alliance. The woman hesitated, asking if she could visit him someday after she retired. Woon said she could come find him if she ever got bored to death. When she pressed for his location, he stopped and turned back, telling her she could find him in Hubei Province, Hulong County. Sometime later, the scene shifted to Woon traveling on a boat. The boatman rowed steadily as Woon reflected internally that it had been a long journey. He recalled leaving his clan to grow stronger, joining the Murim Alliance, mastering martial arts, and climbing all the way up to the rank of captain. 12 long years had passed, and now the time had come to found his own sect. He had saved enough money to buy a manor, and the perfect property had just gone up for sale. Everything was finally aligning perfectly. Feeling elated, he couldn't contain his excitement and thought the heavens themselves must be smiling on him. Laughing loudly, he startled the boatman who eyed him suspiciously and wondered if he had picked up a crazy passenger. Woon quickly apologized, explaining that he had simply gotten carried away. He said he was on his way to finalize the purchase of a manor, the foundation of his lifelong dream, his own sect. The boatman, giving him a side glance, asked if he was a young sect leader, then hesitated and muttered that there was only one manor for sale around those parts, the haunted one. Woon asked why he was muttering, but the man brushed it off and wished that Woon's sect would flourish safely. Woon laughed lightly, thanking him, saying that all that was left was to sign the contract. What could possibly go wrong? That optimism didn't last long. The moment he saw this manor, his excitement shattered. The grand estate he had imagined turned out to be an abandoned wreck of crumbling buildings. The merchant broker accompanying him confirmed this was indeed the place. Woon, unimpressed, grabbed the broker Yuryang by the collar in frustration, accusing him of trying to scam him. Yuryang, sweating bullets, insisted that the place was extremely hard to obtain and begged Woon to at least look around before deciding. They entered the dusty manor and Woon complained that it was filthy and obviously hadn't been maintained for years. The broker promised to explain everything once they finished the tour. He detailed that the manor had 45 rooms across the main and side buildings along with 5 training halls, 4 small ones and 1 large which could be used however Woon wished. Intrigued, Woon asked which sect had owned it before, noting how rare it was to find so many training grounds. The broker said he wasn't sure, only that it was an ancient property. He tried to sweeten the deal, saying that with some repairs it could be perfect for founding a new sect. Woon paused, thinking it might be true but still feeling uneasy. When he pressed Yuryang about what was wrong with the place, the broker smiled nervously, admitting that Woon always cut straight to the point. Finally, he confessed that nothing major was wrong, except for the fact that every previous owner had died. That revelation hit Woon like a cold slap. He repeated the word died. In disbelief, the broker nodded grimly, explaining that all of them had died without wounds from sudden heart failure always on the night they purchased the property. People now called it haunted. Even bodyguards and exorcists hadn't made a difference. Then giving a death glare to the broker, Woon said that the man was trying to sell that thing to him. The broker, now panicking, hesitated as he stammered that this was why he was offering it for 1/10th of the market price. Woon replied that he just accept maybe 504 silver ingots. The merchant hesitated for a long moment, clearly torn. But after hearing this price, Woon stepped closer, placing a hand on the man's shoulder with fake friendliness, his tone shifting into that smooth, deceptive warmth. With a fake laugh, he remarked that the broker should have said that before. He had almost misunderstood him, his so-called friend. While the broker accepted the money, tears streamed down his face, his expression a portrait of silent suffering and regret. Then the broker took something out, remarking with forced respect that it was just as expected from Bakley Woon, the captain of the Murim alliance, and handed over the deed. The deed was offered and Woon accepted it in his hand. Right at that moment, a system panel appeared before him. Flashing the message, received the deed. Hearing that, Woon looked a bit shaken, momentarily confused. The broker noticed his reaction and asked what was wrong, but Woon brushed it off, thinking it was just his imagination. The broker then declared his job was done and left, saying that if Woon was still alive after one night, he should come find him. Woon just agreed casually and watched as the merchant walked away from the manor, leaving him alone in his newly owned property. For a moment, silence hung heavy inside the manor. Then suddenly, Woo exploded into laughter, shouting with wild excitement that he finally had his very own manor. He yelled again that it was his own manor. And because of all that shouting, people on the nearby streets got spooked. Hearing the maniacal laughter coming from inside, one, still caught up in his joy, declared that now all that was left was to recruit disciples. Slamming a nearby pillar with a grin, he admired the building with fierce pride. Dust rained down from the impact and he started coughing, muttering that the first thing he should probably do was clean up a bit. Without hesitation, Wound climbed up on walls and started sweeping the floors, cleaning the dust, polishing every corner of his newly acquired manor. Time passed as the sun began to set, and eventually he stood on the staircase, saying that all that was left now was the main hall. He opened the massive doors and said to himself that it was time to finish this. But as soon as he stepped inside, he noticed something. A sword placed neatly in the center of the hall. Curious, he approached it, wondering if the previous owner had left it behind, thinking that it might fetch a decent price. He took the sword in hand and began to sheath it. But as he did, the blade started glowing blue. The light reflected in Woo's eyes as the entire hall was suddenly consumed in a swirl of white and blue light, almost as if reality itself was warping. A system panel appeared. Evaluating martial artist objective sect establishment. Evaluating overall grade 2nd grade. Then another message followed. You have received the highest grade among all evaluates. Wound frowned in confusion, wondering what was happening this time, but he didn't have the luxury to think for long. Something came flying straight toward him, and he narrowly dodged it, leaving a shallow cut across his face. Another panel popped up, adjusting test difficulty. Wound realized immediately what was going on. This was what had killed all the previous owners. He muttered that. So this was it. The cause behind their deaths. The shot had come from a cannon. and he deduced that the iron ball fired must have been launched from that thing. Then another message. Test commencing. Difficulty extreme. Wound gripped his sword, smirking as he said he'd take it head-on. Another message followed. Trial. Test of martial prowess. The cannon fired again, launching another iron ball toward him. Wound slashed at mid-air, splitting it clean in half with deadly precision, declaring that he'd show why he was once captain of the Murim Alliance. In full battle stance, he taunted the system to bring it on. But as he lowered his sword, he noticed a semi-circular crack forming in its blade. More iron balls were fired and Woon dodged them all, moving fast, keeping a calculated distance. Eventually, he realized the cannon had a range limit. Outside it, the balls couldn't reach him. Looking at his nearly destroyed sword, he sighed, saying he could rest a bit, but then he noticed another sword lying on the ground. In surprise, he remarked that the system was giving him another one. Holding it, he smirked, noting that there was at least some flexibility in the rules. Without wasting time, he dashed forward with incredible velocity, thinking that if the cannon didn't attack beyond a certain point, then it must be guarding something behind it. He charged ahead to find out what it was protecting. But as he got close, more cannons appeared. Multiple all at once. They fired simultaneously. Iron balls flying in a deadly storm. Wound moved like a blur, slashing through incoming projectiles and dodging by mere inches. But even his skill was being tested to the limit. Then, after another clash, his sword finally shattered in half. One last iron ball came from behind, about to crush his skull. A massive blast erupted. But when the smoke cleared, Wound stood unharmed. He had used his flowing moon strike. Blue lightning crackled around him. A swirl of wind gathering as he dashed forward using phantom field technique at high speed, charging his broken blade with crescent slash. He unleashed a final blow with all his strength. The strike connected, cracking the virtual barrier. In the next second, Wound was thrown backward as the field shattered and disappeared. He looked around, wondering if more iron balls were coming, but nothing happened. His broken sword was dissolving into blue dust when another system panel appeared. Test concluded. He questioned if it was really over. The manor's appearance had changed. Somehow another panel followed. You have passed the test of martial prowess. Then another. All manor functions will now unlock to their highest grade. Moments later, a new sword materialized in the hall, levitating, surrounded by swirling blue energy. It shimmered with divine glow as it floated into Woo's hand. He thought to himself that after all that, this was the least it could do. Then another message appeared. Trial will conclude once you name the manor. Wound tilted his head, chuckling as he said the name had already been decided. He proclaimed that the heavens that must be righteous shall now be named the Righteous Heaven Sect. A confirmation flashed across the panel. Manor registered under the name Righteous Heaven Sect. A glowing symbol appeared on Woon's hand. He smirked, calling out for any ghost or spirit living there to come out and reveal itself. But the panel continued, initializing sect system. Wound stood there puzzled and intrigued, a mix of confusion and curiosity flashing across his face. The next day, the scene transitioned to a building where someone was running. It was none other than Woon. He burst through the door, fury radiating off him as he shouted the merchant's name. The merchant simply smiled, greeting him with a smug tone and calling him Billy Woon. Then casually asked if everything had been fine through the night. Woon, however, stormed closer, grabbed the merchant by the collar, and demanded an explanation, raging that the man hadn't warned him something like that would show up. The merchant looked genuinely confused, but Woon pointed behind him, insisting that something had been following him since last night. There, hovering in the air, was a glowing system panel. Woon, still seething, questioned what the hell that thing was. But from the merchant's perspective, there was absolutely nothing there. The merchant tilted his head, slightly amused, and asked if Wound had perhaps hit his head during the night. They eventually sat down to talk things out, though Wound's mood was still far from calm. The merchant then remarked that if things kept going wrong, he would simply take the manor back. Woon immediately shot that idea down, stating he still needed the manor for now. The merchant nodded and said he had to prepare for the sect establishment ceremony, noting there was a lot to be done. Woon leaned back, thinking aloud that he needed to have some uniforms made, asking if the merchant had any recommendations, saying he'd need around 20 sets. After a moment of thought, the merchant suggested a few local fabric shops nearby, but warned that they wouldn't be easy to deal with right now. All the major shops were busy trying to win a collaboration contract with the Yellow Dragon Hall. As they spoke, a servant entered quietly, pouring tea for both the merchant and Woon. Woo's brow furrowed as he muttered to himself, questioning whether that Yellow Dragon Hall could be that Yellow Dragon Hall he had heard of. Before he could even finish the thought, the merchant confirmed it between slow sips of tea, saying they had supplied textiles to the imperial family for generations. Because of that legacy, the Yellow Dragon Hall held immense influence. Even within Murim, both orthodox and unorthodox sects relied on them, and even the great clans treaded carefully around their hallmaster. Taking another calm sip, the merchant pointed out that with Woon's budget, there was absolutely no way he could afford their materials, so he shouldn't worry about it. Woon admitted he was right, though he remarked bitterly that it still didn't sound very nice. The merchant chuckled and added that rumors about Woon's manor being haunted wouldn't help either, claiming he doubted anyone would trade with him now. He casually advised Woon to try the textile market instead. Right then, the system panel flickered into view again, flashing a message that read, "Haunted Manor." "That's a bit much, isn't it?" Wound glared at the panel, mentally, telling it to shut up before thinking how strange it was. He had only signed the contract yesterday. How the hell had rumors spread this fast? His gaze snapped back to the merchant, who was suddenly sweating bullets as he nervously sipped his tea. The man stammered that gossip tended to travel faster than the wind. It didn't take Woon long to put two and two together. This bastard had been the one spreading the rumors. Drawing his blade, he demanded to know if the merchant was the one behind it. The merchant trembled, his voice cracking as he tried to pass it off as free publicity for Woon's sect. With a fake smile, he added that rumors aside, the fact that Woo was still alive proved the manor wasn't actually dangerous, so it would be fine. That only pushed Woon over the edge. He lashed out in anger, yelling that it was all the merchant's fault for introducing that haunted place to him in the first place. Moments later, the scene shifted to the marketplace. Woon stood outside a shop only for the shopkeeper to slam the door in his face, saying he wasn't selling anything to him. Even as Woon pleaded to at least let him make an offer, the man shouted again from behind the door, telling him to get lost and calling him an unlucky bastard who brought bad omens wherever he went. Frustrated, Woon wandered through the busy streets, muttering to himself about how quickly rumors spread here. People whispered and pointed as he passed, forcing himself to stay calm. He reminded himself that his first impression couldn't be that of some raving lunatic. Right then he heard someone shouting nearby, an angry voice demanding to be let go. Woon turned his head toward the sound. There, in the middle of the market, a child was clinging to the pants of a grown man, refusing to let go. The kid yelled that the man had promised to save his sister while the bully snarled at him, calling him a brat. Before things escalated further, an old man rushed in, trying to separate them, calling out to the child, Sue, and asking what was going on. Still clutching the man's pant leg, the boy cried that the men had deceived him, claiming they could cure his sister's illness, but instead they had stolen his money. The bully's response was a brutal punch to the boy's face, blood spilling instantly. He spat that the sister was hopeless, that even doctors had given up on her. The old man's face darkened as he recognized the insignia on their robes and called them out as members of the White Sword Sect, berating them for bullying a child. Another man with green hair, clearly the senior among the bullies, hissed for the others not to let this reach the sect's ears and to handle it quietly. The first bully nodded, drew his sword, and told the old man he should have gone quietly when he had the chance. The old man stepped forward, shielding Isu, his expression grim as he muttered that they had now forced him to stain his hands with blood. Before the bully could act, a voice called out from behind him. He turned, and in that split second of hesitation, his fate was sealed. Woon appeared and kicked him square in the face with such force that the man practically shot himself before crumpling to the ground. The market froze in silence as the bully hit the dirt in one blow. His green-haired companion demanded to know who Woon was. Woon straightened up, calm but deadly, saying that his name might not carry much weight these days, but it was still polite to answer when asked. Then, with a smirk, he declared himself the sect leader of the Righteous Heaven Sect, Bakley Woon. Another lackey from the White Sword Sect lunged from the side, roaring about, "How dare some unknown sect leader interfere in their affairs?" He swung his sword at Woon, but in the blink of an eye, Woon dodged and struck him with a precise energy. Charge chopped to the arm, snapping it clean. The man screamed in agony, collapsing his wound, coldly remarked that it was never wise to judge someone solely by their sex fame, especially when they had no clue what their opponent was capable of. A third lackey, furious, demanded if Woon intended to make the White Sword Sect his enemy, shouting if he even knew what that meant. Woon didn't hesitate. He punched him so fast that the man went flying across the street, muttering simply that he didn't care. The green-haired bastard narrowed his eyes, realizing who Woon must be. He said people had been talking about the former captain of the Murim Alliance buying a haunted manor, asking if that had been him. Woon sighed, rubbing his face in exasperation, wondering just how far those stupid rumors had spread already. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the merchant who had started it all choked on his tea, spilling it all over himself as he remembered Woon's glare. Back in the market, Woon pointed his blade at the green-haired man, saying he was already in a bad mood because he couldn't even get uniforms made thanks to that cursed rumor. He told him to stop running his mouth behind his back and to come at him directly instead. Then with a teasing grin, he added, "Bring it on." That was all the provocation it took. The green-haired fighter stepped forward, declaring that this was now an official challenge against the White Sword Sect and calling Woo an arrogant fool. He swore to teach him a lesson for daring to stand against them. The green-haired bastard swung his sword, but it missed Woo. Right at that moment, another lackey appeared from behind, lunging to attack Woon. Now Woon found himself fighting 2 versus 1, surrounded on both sides. In the next moment, he elbowed one of the lackeys and drove a punch straight into the gut of the green-haired bastard, taking him down in a single brutal second. The green-haired bastard lay on the ground, screaming in pain. Looming over him, Woon remarked that it was indeed a challenge. With a cold, dead stare, he pushed the sword aside from the green-haired bastard, letting the man feel raw fear flood his veins. He warned that if it was a fight they wanted, they could come to the Righteous Heaven Sect any time. And if they didn't want things to get uglier, they should leave quietly while they still could. The bullies of the White Sword Sect left, muttering that Woo would regret this, while Woon turned to question Seo if he was all right. The small boy then mentioned that Woo had been looking for someone to make uniforms, saying that his sister was really skilled at sewing. The protagonist seemed curious, but before he could respond further, Esu began begging and bowing before him, pleading for Woo to save his sister. Woon hesitated, saying that it sounded more like a physician's job. But before he could finish, a system message appeared before him. It read, "New trade opportunity detected. Target is a 3rd grade." Hearing that, Woon thought that 3rd grade sounded pretty high. He then asked So to tell him more. Seo explained that their parents had passed away last year, leaving just him and his sister. As they traveled through forests, they had managed to survive thanks to her sewing skills, but recently she had fallen ill, her hands and feet freezing over. An old man nearby murmured that it seemed to be a freezing sickness. Woon, curious, asked the old man who he was. The old man coughed and introduced himself as the owner of a small fabric shop in the next village. He used to hire Isu's sister for work, but had lost contact with her and had been worried since. Seo led the group to his home, a small, fragile hut that barely stood upright. Woon couldn't help but think that he hoped the place wouldn't collapse on them. The moment they entered, Esu excitedly announced to his sister that he had brought the warrior who catches ghosts. Though Woon didn't agree with that title, he decided to let it slide. What he saw next, however, left him shocked. Su's sister was holding her hands and feet directly in the fire. Even so, her skin remained unharmed. Woo's thoughts raced as he realized this was worse than he had expected. Just then, a system panel appeared, stating that the fire's heat and the cold in her limbs were clashing violently. Woon wondered inwardly if this could be a side effect of yin energy cultivation. He spoke, confirming that she must be Soa, and mentioned that her brother had begged him to save her. Sewa seemed surprised, but admitted that Isu often worried. Woo asked if the flames didn't hurt her, to which she replied that they didn't. If she didn't do this, she'd get frostbite. Woon was taken aback at the mention of frostbite. At that moment, the old man appeared, asking what was going on. So, greeted him, surprised to see him there while he explained that he had been worried after losing contact with her. She apologized, saying it was because her condition had worsened. Woon then asked if he could check her pulse. So hesitated but extended her hand. Woon gently took it, and she requested that he be quick. As he held her hand, Woon gathered a faint energy into his fingers, letting it pulse through her body. A bright light emanated from Sua's palm as another system panel appeared, warning that she was absorbing too much yin energy and that it would become dangerous at this rate. Woon acknowledged it and told the system to stop nagging, though from her perspective only saw him talking to thin air. Another system panel appeared, stating that excessive energy had invaded her body. Concentrating deeply, Woon soon realized the truth and admitted that he understood the situation. So asked if he really did, and he confirmed. He explained that she possessed what was known as an extreme yin body, a rare constitution that absorbed yin energy from the surroundings and stored it within. He mentioned that the Sword Empress herself was known to have the same kind of body. Sewa was amazed upon hearing that name. Woon clarified further, saying that the Sword Empress was the master of the Sword Pavilion, one of the 10 heavens, and stood at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Thua found it incredible, Woon continued, explaining the truth behind it. For a martial artist, such a constitution was a blessing. But in her case, she had absorbed far too much yin energy, causing her yang energy to dry up. If it continued, she would die within 3 months. The words left Soa stunned. Woon added that she must have already sensed it. So admitted that it was true and that there seemed to be no cure. Her brother, Siu, shouted that it was a lie and accused Woon of being like the others, while the old man grimly stated that even medicine would not help. Woon explained that medicine could only delay the symptoms briefly before they returned even worse. Internally, he thought that the key lay in restoring her yang energy steadily. At that moment, another system panel appeared, suggesting the use of essence water, which could be obtained upon quest completion and used to boost sect members' recovery rate. Another message followed, explaining that it provided minor recovery, increasing both health and inner energy regeneration for sect members, and that 50 units were available for immediate use. Woon puzzled over the mention of health and inner energy recovery when suddenly a new quest panel appeared. Recruit your first disciple. Reward 50 essence water. Woon thought the system was moving too fast. Now it wanted him to take on a disciple. Then an idea clicked in his head. If he treated Soa and recruited her as his disciple, it would be 2 birds with 1 stone. Calling out to Soa, W admitted that he wasn't entirely sure yet, but he believed he had found a way to help. Siwa had barely finished saying pardon before Wu extended his hand toward her, calling out for her to become his disciple. The suddenness of it made both Esiwa and her younger brother Seo visibly anxious. Essie questioned his intentions, confused by what he meant by asking her to become a disciple out of nowhere. Woon, however, simply told her to trust him just this once. She hesitated, admitting that she had never learned martial arts before, and wondered what he was even thinking, asking her to become a martial artist. In that moment, Soa's inner voice took over, narrating the bitterness carved into her heart. The world of Murim, she reflected, was filled with people who boasted about righteousness and chivalry, but most of them were selfish hypocrites. They acted like they would help. Yet in the end, they always prioritized saving their own skins. That was how their parents had gotten caught up and died in the conflicts between so-called noble sects. To her, Wound might be no different. Another man pretending to help, only to abandon her when things got tough. And now he was asking her to join the same kind of corrupt martial artist circle she despised. But right then her gaze caught Wu's hand, faintly purplish, almost frostbitten. Despite the pain etched into his skin, the determination in his expression didn't waver one bit. He seemed unshaken, declaring that such a wound was nothing if it meant he could cure her. Something in those words stirred inside Soa. Maybe, just maybe, this man was different, and before she knew it, the thought escaped her lips. It couldn't be helped. If there was even a chance she could be healed, she would trust him one last time. As their hands met, a faint shimmer crossed their joined palms. So muttered that she would be counting on him, sealing the deal. Instantly, a system panel flashed before them. Quest recruit your first disciple study complete. Another notification followed. You have obtained 50 essence water. The digital glow faded, but another system message appeared almost immediately. Body contact with yin energy detected. Minor injury sustained on user's hand. A radiant glow enveloped both wounds and so was hands, the energy pulsating between them. Another message appeared, stating that essence water was being used to initiate a minor recovery effect. The process unfolded before their eyes, so was frostbitten skin slowly regaining warmth and color. She could hardly believe it. Her hands were actually getting warmer. Then came another panel. SEC members' health and inner energy recovery rate has increased. Woon's eyes lit up as he thought to himself that it was working. Yet another panel followed, applying additional recovery effects, minor spirit energy, focuser, sect members, health restoration in progress. A swirl of energy gathered luminous and alive between Woon's and Sewa's palms. He could feel it, the yang energy flowing again. Another panel appeared, confirming sect members' yang energy is being restored. Moments later, Seiwa's face lit up in astonishment. She could barely comprehend what was happening, realizing that her hands and feet were healing right before her eyes. Seo, overwhelmed with joy, ran up to his sister, shouting her name. The old man nearby, who had been watching silently, broke the moment by asking whether Woon had healed her using energy arts. Woon simply replied that it was something like that. The old man burst out laughing. Impressed, he called the scene a spectacle, and admitted he liked Woon's spirit, finally understanding why the Murim Alliance leader held him in such high regard. Those words instantly made Woon cautious. So this old man knew the Alliance leader. Before Woon could ask, the man spoke again. Realizing he had forgotten to introduce himself, he revealed his name as Chon Gamyong, the owner of Yellow Dragon Hall, or as he put it more simply, the Yellow Dragon Hall Master. As he said this, a majestic image of a dragon shimmered behind him, a spectral symbol of his authority and power. The scene transitioned to the White Sword Sect, where rows of disciples were seen bowing before an elderly man, their sect leader. The tension in the air was palpable as the man addressed them, furious over the humiliation they had suffered at the hands of a new sect. Among the trembling disciples, it was seen that the green-haired one apologized, but his words did nothing to calm the elder's rage. In a burst of anger, the sect leader thrust a wooden stick into the disciple's palm, making him growl in agony. After settling into a nearby seat, the sect leader mockingly asked if it hurt, remarking that the disciple's pain was nothing compared to the humiliation he himself would face. The disciple, writhing and pale, stammered out another apology. Rising to his feet, the sect leader ordered his servants to drag them all to the punishment chambers. The disciples were immediately seized, their struggles futile. The green-haired one cried out desperately, begging for forgiveness, pleading for one more chance. But the sect leader did not flinch. As he walked away, he muttered a name with venomous disdain: Woon. The culprit who had brought disgrace upon the White Sword Sect, his face twisted into a maniacal grin as he vowed to host a grand welcoming party for that name. He chuckled darkly, intrigued by what kind of person his new adversary truly was. Meanwhile, Woon was seen facing a different kind of tension, standing before the master of the Yellow Dragon Hall. A drop of sweat trickled down his face as the old man introduced himself as Chon Gamyong, the powerful Halm of the Yellow Dragon Hall. Nearby, Sewa bowed deeply, apologizing for not recognizing him sooner. The old man dismissed it lightly and turned his attention back to Woon, offering him a place in the Yellow Dragon Hall and promising support for any of his ambitions. Woon, maintaining an unreadable poker face, listened in silence while internally analyzing. The Yellow Dragon Hall was a massive merchant guild that supplied the palace with fine silk and garments. Just then, a system panel flashed before him. You have detected the beginnings of a new business partner. Opponents rank first grade Sevi Yellow Dragon Hall. Woon thought to himself that the hall also possessed numerous martial masters, enough to make even renowned sects tread carefully. Chon Gamyong's influence reached both the Murim Alliance and the unorthodox Murim, making this a tempting offer. Yet it wasn't the path Woon desired. When he finally spoke, he politely declined, explaining that he had just taken in his first disciple, catching Sila off guard as she realized he was referring to her. Shan Gamyong's expression hardened, his tone turning threatening as he asked if Woon dared reject him. But Wu stood his ground, boldly suggesting that instead of joining, he wished to conduct business with the Yellow Dragon Hall and promised to bring them fame worthy of their name. The old man twitched at the audacity, scoffing that he had shown kindness only to be repaid with arrogance. When Woon clarified his vision to create within 10 years a sect equal to the orthodox Murim 10 sects and the unorthodox Muram 7 clans, Chon Gamyong burst out laughing, calling it absurd. Woon, unwavering, affirmed his claim, finding it ridiculous yet oddly entertaining. The hall micked his confidence, but Wu added that the fame he promised wasn't for the old man himself, further provoking his irritation. Chon Gamyong's anger flared once again as he demanded to know if Woon was joking. One, calm and steady, requested an introduction to the Halm's disciple, stating he wanted to negotiate with the Yellow Dragon Hall's future. The old man, regaining composure, agreed and said he would send his disciple to Woon's sect. Whether the deal succeeded would depend on that disciple. However, his tone sharpened as he warned Woon that if disappointment followed, he would have to take full responsibility. The aura around him darkened, a furious dragon manifestation appearing behind his form. But Woon, equally fierce, replied that there was no need to worry, his own authority emanating as the image of a white tiger cloaked in blue lightning surged behind him. Satisfied yet wary, Shan Gamyang called out for silk to be brought in. Startled murmurs filled the air as several members of the Yellow Dragon Hall appeared outside the hut. They bowed, greeting their leader respectfully as a carriage waited for him, handing Woon a bundle of exquisite silk. The old man remarked that it was a contract fee, a gift for the spectacle he had witnessed, insisting that Wu not refuse. Wu accepted graciously, internally admiring the might and sophistication of the Yellow Dragon Hall. Their martial presence was immense. He had sensed it all along, but hadn't realized how close they truly were. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Chongamyong departed in his carriage, chuckling about Woon's arrogance, amused by the boldness of a man who dared to promise him fame. He then instructed his servant to take him to an old friend, declaring that he wished to visit the Evil Path Alliance for a drink. The carriage rolled off into the night, fading into the darkness. By the next day, Wu was seen dressed in new traditional attire that shimmered in the morning light. So, smiling proudly, asked for his opinion on the outfit she had made. Wu responded with approval, clearly impressed. So admitted it was her first time working with such high-quality silk, while Wu acknowledged how comfortable it felt, even when moving. Another system panel appeared, declaring that the clothing piece had been expertly crafted. Following that, another line flashed across. Please pick a reward. A shimmering, glowing light appeared in Woon's hand, leaving him puzzled. A new system message popped up stating that the reward could be chosen from 3 options: Advanced Sorcery Countertext, Advanced Miracle Medicine of Talent, and Exclusive Trade Unlock. Reading through them, Woon thought they were all incredible choices, though the first 2 seemed particularly tempting. Yet without hesitation, he selected the 3rd option. The system acknowledged his decision, confirming that he had chosen the reward Exclusive Trait Unlock. Immediately after, another panel appeared, indicating that he could now unlock the traits of his sect members. As Woon's eyes naturally drifted towards Soa, her profile appeared in front of him. Sewa, 17 years old, born with exceptionally strong yin energy. Though her martial arts potential was hindered by a long break from physical activity. Her listed traits were diligence, adversity, and responsibility. However, a warning followed. The target lacked sufficient internal energy, and trait unlocking was not yet possible. Woon read her traits under his breath, repeating the words diligence, adversity, and responsibility. Wondering why he couldn't select any of them. Another panel appeared, explaining that her discipline grade needed to be increased before unlocking. He found that utterly unfair, but quickly decided to fix it, thinking that he'd make her stronger and open those traits himself. With determination, he commanded Essie, Yoa, and Seo to begin training immediately. The scene shifted. Sua was taken aback. In her mind, Siwa struggled to see any connection between herself and martial arts. The thought of actually learning it felt almost absurd. She doubted herself, wondering if she could really do well. Even though Woon had reached out to her, a fear lingered. What if she messed everything up? But then she remembered his comforting words, telling her not to worry, and that everything would be fine as long as he could heal her. That memory made her laugh softly, and she began warming up, deciding to trust him and leave her worries behind. Moments later, with a burst of optimism, she asked what kind of martial arts she would be learning, and training began with the most basic stance, the horse stance. Essa found herself struggling to maintain balance, awkwardly holding the posture known as the horseback riding pose. Quickly exhausted, she thought that this wasn't what she had imagined. She had expected something more exciting, something that looked like actual martial arts. But Woon told her it was because she wasn't fit yet. And for now, her focus had to be on building stamina. She questioned how long she had to hold that stance, and his response was simple. 1 hour. The idea of standing in that uncomfortable position for an entire hour horrified her, but Woon encouraged her to keep going. Silently, she questioned her life decisions while her legs trembled under the strain. As she held the stance, she wondered aloud if she would ever be able to learn martial arts properly. Woon reassured her that she was born with a high affinity for yin energy. He explained that internal energy naturally accumulated in her body. Though it leaned heavily toward yin, it would be fine as long as she could form a Dante. Inwardly, Woon thought to himself that an absolute yin body like hers was a rare gift. She was born in perfect condition to become a martial artist, and he couldn't afford to lose her. Suddenly, a system panel appeared, humorously, stating that the user's creepiness level had increased. But before Woon could react, a panicked voice called out in the distance. Turning toward the sound, Woon saw the merchant rushing toward him in horror. The man shouted that the White Sword Sect had already sent a letter. Confused, the merchant asked if Woon personally knew their sect leader. Woon was puzzled by the mention of the White Sword Sect. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't immediately recall why. Kim, however, looked furious and cursed under his breath, calling them bastards. Woon suddenly remembered. Those were the same people he had beaten up the day before. With a casual curiosity, he opened the scroll to see what it contained inside. It stated that the White Sword Sect was hosting a duel competition and had invited them to attend. The focus shifted again. The White Sword Sect, as history had it, held dominion over the region. Their leader was infamous for his personality, with rumors suggesting that he enjoyed humiliating weaker opponents during the so-called duels. The merchant explained that the sect usually targeted opponents of similar or slightly weaker levels, but their own sect was entirely new and unheard of. His words accidentally carried a tone of insult, and immediately every member of the Righteous Heaven Sect, including Woon, turned to glare at him with deathly stares. Even the system seemed to join in, amplifying the awkward tension. Realizing his mistake, the merchant hurried to clarify that it was a misunderstanding. Woon, still smiling, said that the merchant was probably right. The White Sword Sect must be trying to embarrass them. But instead of being intimidated, he found it amusing. He declared that this was going to be fun and that it was their opportunity to spread the name of the Righteous Heaven Sect. Meanwhile, SOA, still holding her horse stance, looked worried. She wondered aloud if they would really be all right since it was just the two of them. Wouldn't she end up being a burden? One casually replied that she would be the one attending the competition alone. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she stammered that she understood, resolving that she would have to train even harder if she was going to participate solo. But mere seconds later, the realization hit her. She had just agreed to enter a competition all by herself.